Hi, my name is Evelina Johansson and I'm a PhD candidate in English linguistics with a focus on language learning at the Department of Languages and Literature at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. And today I'm going to present part of my research project, which focuses on the assessment of high order thinking in EFL courses at Swedish universities. So before talking about the actual research project, I think it's a good idea to explain some of the terms and to define some of the terms that I will use in this presentation. So first and foremost, what is higher order thinking? Well, the idea about higher order thinking is based on a framework for educational objectives developed by Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues in the 1950s. And this framework has later been revised several times, and for the purpose of this study I have used the revised version of Bloom's taxonomy from 2001. So the idea is that thinking skills or thinking levels go from less complex to more complex cognitive skills. And the revised version of Bloom's taxonomy includes 6 different thinking levels, which I will present in the coming slide. So this is the revised Bloom's taxonomy. And as you can see here, thinking skills go from the more basic levels such as remember and understand to apply and more cognitively complex skills such as analyze, evaluate, and create. The 3 top levels, analyze, evaluate, and create, are often considered to be higher order thinking skills, while the 3 bottom levels, remember, understand, and apply, are often considered to be lower order thinking skills. And this is also the division between high order thinking and lower order thinking that I've used in my study. Highly related to the idea about high order thinking is that of critical thinking. And these two are often seen as similar cognitive processes, which I also believe that they are, and that these two concepts go hand in hand with each other. However, there is a difference, and that is that there is no real consensus definition of what constitutes critical thinking. As I mentioned before, it's very easy to define high order thinking. That is not the case with critical thinking, and that is one of the reasons why I've chosen often to use high order thinking instead of critical thinking, especially in analyzing assessment tasks and learning outcomes, which I will talk about later in this presentation. Also, another thing to remember is that there is a debate if whether or not critical thinking is subject-specific, so that you learn it in one subject and you can apply it to that subject, but only in that subject, or if it's a more general skill that if you learn critical thinking, then you can apply it to different subjects and different circumstances. So why is it interesting then to investigate the topic of high order thinking and critical thinking in EFL courses at Swedish universities? Well, first and foremost, the ability to think critically and to use high order thinking skills are mentioned as intended learning outcomes in the qualification descriptor of bachelor's degree. And these learning outcomes are set by the Swedish Council of Higher Education, and they apply to all bachelor's degrees in all subjects at Swedish universities. Hence, students are sort of expected to learn critical thinking and high order thinking and to develop these skills in higher education courses. And therefore, I think it's interesting to investigate how much focus really is placed on critical thinking and high order thinking in English courses. Another reason why it's interesting to investigate this in English EFL courses is that there seems previous research points to a relationship between critical thinking and thinking skills in general and second language proficiency. So Manal and Shepard, for example, they explain this relationship by the cognitive cost theory. And the idea is that both critical thinking and using a second or a foreign language demand certain cognitive resources. And speakers of a second or a foreign language may then have executed the cognitive resources available to them, which in turn will lead to insufficient cognitive resources for the execution of critical thinking skills. So let's talk about my research project then. This is, as I mentioned, part of my PhD project, and I will only present a small part of it here today. But the research questions which have driven this project are the following. How do English courses at Swedish universities in terms of learning outcomes and assessment tasks focus on critical thinking and high-order thinking? And how do English teachers at Swedish universities perceive high-order thinking and critical thinking in the assessment of these in English courses? And what differences between linguistics and literature pertaining to critical thinking and high-order thinking can be detected in English courses? And the reason for this last research question is that English courses at Swedish universities and in a lot of other European universities at least are often divided into linguistic modules and literature modules. So these are content courses, while at the same time being courses that are meant to develop students' English proficiency. And here are the research methods that I've used. I have done an analysis of learning outcomes in all second semester English courses at Swedish universities. I have done an analysis of assessment tasks in 4 English courses at Swedish universities, and also sent out a questionnaire to teachers working at these universities and with these courses. So the analysis of learning outcomes is based on the action verbs in these and included 190 learning outcomes. These in turn included 219 action verbs. And I found that 38% of these targeted the 3 highest levels of the revised taxonomy, that is analyze, evaluate, and create. And here you can see some examples of learning outcomes. Here we look at the same data but analyze it in consideration of this division between linguistics and literature, and I found that 22 of 69 learning outcomes target high-order thinking skills in linguistic modules, and that 58 of 72 learning outcomes target high-order thinking in literature modules. And a statistical analysis was conducted to investigate this difference, and I found that there was a statistically significant difference with a large effect size. So let's look at the assessment of high-order thinking in these courses then. And here we look at 4 courses, English intermediate courses at 4 different Swedish universities, and the results here are calculated per credit, and that means that I have tried to calculate how much each assessment task was worth in course credits and not in frequency. And this was in order to make up for the uneven weight placed on different assessment tasks. So a total of 500 assessment tasks were analyzed, and these included, for example, assignments, essay instructions, questions on exams, etc. And as we can see here, 3 of 4 courses included more high-order thinking assessment tasks than lower-order thinking assessment tasks. And similar to the learning outcomes, we find that literature modules included more high-order thinking assessment tasks than linguistic modules did. And I also ran a statistical analysis of the results, and I found that there was a significant difference between literature modules and linguistic modules with a moderate effect size. So I wanted to investigate this topic of high-order thinking, critical thinking in these courses from the teacher's perspective, but also see if the differences between linguistics and literature that I've talked about already could be traced back to teachers' views about high-order thinking and critical thinking. And as you can see here from this slide, I found that most teachers were aware of what high-order thinking skills are, and that they believed that these were important to a high extent, and that they also thought that assessment tasks were a way to help students develop these skills. So from the questionnaire, where a few differences between linguistics and literature teachers could be detected. The only real difference was in how comfortable teachers felt in developing assessment tasks which target the skill remember. And literature teachers felt less comfortable than the other teachers. And I think that the problem with the questionnaire is that it doesn't give this kind of deep data that we need in order to investigate perceptions and views on critical thinking and higher order thinking. And for that reason, I have also decided to conduct a small interview study on the same topic, and I hope that this will further highlight the possible differences and similarities then between linguistics and literature teachers in their views of higher order thinking. So the content of this is that learning outcomes in English courses at Swedish universities include more low order thinking skills than high order thinking skills, but that assessment tasks, on the other hand, target high order thinking to a larger extent than low order thinking. Both in learning outcomes and in assessment tasks, literature modules, as we could see, focus more on high order thinking than linguistic modules. And it is difficult right now to understand what this difference comes from, because teachers of both subjects express that they think critical thinking and high order thinking are important, and that they assess tasks, that the assessment tasks in their courses focus on these skills. As I mentioned before, critical thinking is described by some as a discipline-specific skill, and I think that the results of this study indicates that or point to that direction, as there seems to be differences between linguistics and literature in terms of assessment of high order thinking and critical thinking. Yes, so what are then the implications of this study? As I mentioned before, there is a need to further investigate and to do a deeper investigation of teachers' perspectives of critical thinking and high order thinking, with a focus on if there are different understandings of what constitutes critical thinking and high order thinking, and of how this should be assessed in linguistic modules and in literature modules. And apparently there seems to be a need for a greater focus of high order thinking and critical thinking in literature modules compared to linguistic modules. Because as I mentioned before in the first slides, the students who undergo education at Swedish universities are expected to develop these skills, and then we also must make sure that students get the opportunity to do that through learning outcomes and teaching tasks and assessment tasks, etc. So thank you for listening to this presentation. It was a short presentation about my research project, and if you're interested, I have published a few articles on this topic, and if you want to get access to them, you can always contact me. Or if you have any questions or comments regarding my research project, then I'm more than willing to answer those questions and to get in contact with you. So thank you very much.